The supreme, profound, and sublime Dharma is difficult to encounter in the being yawns. Now I see it, hear it, receive it, and kept it. I vow to attain the true meaning of the Tathagata. In order to liberate all sentient beings, let us generate supreme bodhicitta.
Well, I'm not sure if I will be able to give a really good class because I had a particular type of Tibetan medicine, and it has the anesthesia function. So my tongue doesn't work very well when I speak, but I tried to take a few cups of water, a few glasses of water. Hopefully that works. So we'll see if I'll perform well today or not. Today we will continue to look at the teaching given by the great Terton Lerab Lingpa on the Three Supremes. Now, this time I'm not giving the oral transmissions through Tibetan language because I have already given you the teachings and you should be able to receive it even if it is in Chinese language. Also, I believe many of you have already received the oral transmissions of the entire collection of great Terton Lerab Lingpa from Lama Anjang and I believe another Lama Gechil or someone like that. So in this way, I do not need to give you the separate recitation of the Tibetan or transmission anymore. Now, since we have already talked about the Three Supremes, why is this so important? Because whatever kinds of virtuous deeds you practice, if you do not have all of the Three Supremes, then these kinds of virtuous deeds would not become the cause of accumulation of merit and wisdom on the Mahayana path. Not only that, maybe they would become a kinds of virtuous deeds of the Hinayana or even of the non-Buddhist practitioners. That is why Denpa Rinpoche once said that if you practice Dharma properly, then it could become the cause of the lower, to be reborn in the lower realms. Today we'll talk about bodhicitta. Bodhicitta has two aspects. The first aspect is that the great compassionate mind that takes the object of all sentient beings. In the clear realization where it says that to make aspiration to benefit others and to seek for the perfect enlightenment, this is the most essential when it comes to making aspiration of bodhicitta. The first aspect, which is the first part of the sentence, is to make aspiration to benefit others, which is using the compassionate mind that is to benefit all sentient beings. The second half of the sentence says that one should have their wisdom to seek for the perfect fruition that is Buddhahood. These two are essential. Some of you may think that, I have lots of compassion, then that means I have bodhicitta, but that is not true. In order to have the genuine bodhicitta, you have to fulfill the two aspects of requirements. The first aspect is compassion to all sentient beings, that pervades the whole space. All of these sentient beings, they're tormented by all kinds of suffering, such as suffering of change, the all-pervasive suffering and the suffering of suffering. All of that. In our daily life, we notice it as well. Let it be all sentient beings that pervades the whole space, that is the animals or human beings or hungry ghosts and so on. They're tormented by all kinds of pain and suffering. Also, not only the sentient beings are tormented by the direct pain and the suffering, they will be tormented by the indirect or are indirectly being affected by the collection or by the compoundedness of the truth of suffering as well. So all sentient beings, either they're experiencing suffering or they will be experiencing suffering. They are either under the control of the suffering, causes of suffering, or the fruition of suffering. Some of the suffering may not be so apparent, but some of the sufferings will become ripened and then they would become apparent. This is stated in the 400 verses where it says that as long as there's change, there is suffering. So, if you care about sentient beings, if you truly notice that beings are suffering, if you see that they're going through all kinds of suffering, then you will generate that genuine, heartfelt feeling that the beings are suffering and they're very pitiful. Now, you may think that, oh, the poor sentient beings, but they're not me, they're not related to me, but that is not true. Now, the author continued to say that within the 6 realms, since we take the cyclic existence again and again, each and every sentient being had been our mothers. We usually would say that the sentient beings are mothers, because all sentient beings had been our mothers. If you use your wisdom to make observation, you will see that each and every sentient being had been our parents before. The reason that it is said that the beings are our mothers, it is in fact not only limited to mothers but fathers as well. For example, in the Brahmajala Sutra, where it says that all men had been my fathers and all women had been my mothers. Why in the Buddhist sutras we usually would speak of mothers? It is because mothers would pay special kindness and attention to us. The beings that we get in touch with, we see, we heard of, some may be human beings, some may be animals, some may be really far away and has nothing, doesn't seem to have anything to do with us. And some may be even our foes, our enemies. They had been our great kind mother in this beginningless cyclic existence. Now, according to the Unfailable Buddhist Sutra, including the Right Mindfulness Sutra, it states that there are great masters who have the miraculous powers of clairvoyance and sees the past and future lives. They would give their proof that all sentient beings had been our mothers. This had been stated in lots of the teachings in Gautama through the evidence of teachings, evidence of logic, and through the pith instructions of the great masters. If you can generate the profound understanding and faith that all sentient beings had been my mothers, is crucial. This is really important because without it, it is not easy. It is very difficult to practice bodhicitta. Now, Venerable Atisha once said that once he was in Newtown area, he saw a horse whose neck is stuck between the tree branches. And then Venerable Atisha told his disciples, saying that, oh, this this is my old mother. He said that this animal or this horse is my mother. And he said that so naturally, without any pretense nor any lag. He just simply right away says that this is my old mother. If we can also contemplate again and again up on the great qualities and the great kindness of our mothers, and then extend that to not only my mother in this lifetime, but mothers of lifetimes. All of these sentient beings, through beginningless samsara, had been our mothers for numerous times. For that reason, we need to practice to acknowledge their kindness and then repay their kindness, and to think about their kindness. There are usually 6 or 7 ways to practice upon it. I believe it is detailedly explained in the commemorandum of the preliminary practices. All sentient beings had been our mothers and had given us great kindness. We have to understand that. Even when we see little ants or earthworms, we need to recognize that they had been our parents, our mothers. Or maybe whenever you're disturbed by mouse running around in your room, especially for the Sangha member living here, and when you encounter mosquitoes, flies, cockroaches, and ants, and so on and so forth, at that time we should not have the muscle reflex and try to kill them right away. Rather, we should remind ourselves that it is only because we lack wisdom. Otherwise, we should be able to see that they had been our mothers. The Buddhist teachings give such profound instructions. And lots of the wisdom or knowledge in this world, in fact, cannot compare to the profundity of Buddha Dharma. The worldly beings have rather very limited cognition and very limited understanding. Whenever we see, for example, this bottle, we think that it truly exists. But through Madhyamika, or even through the modern science, such as quantum physics, it comes to all of them will lead to the conclusion that there is no true existence of the bottle other than the dust or atoms. Similarly, our existence, the existence of our foes, in fact, they are just simply the wrong understanding. They are the false grasp onto a self. They're the existence of the false grasp of self. For that reason, we kept on being trapped in this mad world or this mad understanding, and I couldn't wake up to it. If we look at everything in this world, we would be able to see that none of anything in this world is truly existent. And this is not a fundamentalist statement where I ask you to truly believe it because I said so. It is rather because we use wisdom to make the observation of it. We make observation with emptiness. Now, when it comes to our relatives and loved ones or the enemy and our foes, in fact, they are not truly existent. Rather, they are perceived in such a way because of our unreasonable grasping. That is why I really think that we need to practice compassion and then contemplate that all sentient beings had been our mothers before, without which we would not be able to generate a bodhicitta, just as it is stated in the Mahayana teaching on the six Paramita Sutra, where it says that the six paramitas begins with great compassion. Without a great compassion, then none of those teachings within Mahayana has a foundation. They're simply houses floating in midair, which is not possible. At that time, when we were young, our mothers tried their best to alleviate our fear and suffering and all kinds of calamities and dangers. Our mother had done that for us. We know that mothers would try their best to protect their children. Even the tigers, wolves, and lions, all of those wild beasts, they would try their best to protect their children, their offsprings. They would pay any price to protect them, even their lives. And our parents would try their best not only to protect us, but to provide for us as well, our clothes and food and our shelters and so on. So we need to understand that parents provide all of these precious provisions for us to live in this world, for us to keep our precious life. That is why parents, other than very few percentage of them, I think majority of them would give us the best food and the best things, and to let us have the most precious human life, and to help us to maintain it, to sustain it. That is why in the preliminary practices it says that we should practice the contemplation that mothers had kept us in their care, and that is why we have not died so far. Some may feel that, no, my mother's not kind to me. I don't want to repay her kindness. But this is really foolish, because whenever you think about it, even if your mother is not that caring and so on, but at least she kept you alive. When you first arrive in this world as an infant, you're simply a small ball of flesh. And if your mother is truly not compassionate, she would have thrown you into a garbage bin. But she kept you, she kept on nourishing you and protecting you, and now you're grown up. She encouraged you to study and having the kind of livelihood. She helped you in different aspects. Now, after you grow up, if you do not repay their kindness, the kindness of your mother, of your father, then that is really inappropriate, or it could be considered as a very foolish action. How is our mother treating us now? Even one bite of food, one piece of cloth, or one needle, and one thread, in fact, all of them comes from the kindness of all sentient beings, or our great mothers. Some people may feel that, well, how is it because of them? I bought this. I tried very hard. I worked very hard. It is all because of my creativity. It is because of my perseverance. I got whatever I have right now. Well, that is true. However, all sentient beings, in fact, are interrelated to us. We're all interdependent. Without the other sentient beings, how could we purchase food if no one is planting crops? Though you may feel that I bought it, but if nobody makes them, then you won't be able to get them at all. For that reason, whatever you use, whatever you eat, whatever you wear, it is not because you have money right away they will be created. In fact, they are made by someone. For that reason, we need to have gratitude to all sentient beings. Whenever we see people have all kinds of conflicts, have all kinds of blames to the others, and are not happy with whatever they have, whenever we see such people, not only they do not have any gratitude that should be endowed by practitioners in Hinayana, or even the worldly people have a sense of gratitude to the others. If we do not have that, then how could we practice bodhicitta? How could we practice the Mahayana bodhicitta? That is why within our practice we need to have a sense of gratitude to all sentient beings, to each and every sentient being. This is really important. If you're living really comfortably and happily in this samsara, it is because of the kindness and the providings coming from all sentient beings. Without sentient beings providing provisions, even if you were to have some power, to have merit, you would not be able to have the opportunity to enjoy the different kinds of materials and provisions. And you would be left alone. You won't be able to enjoy anything if you're the only one living in this world. Even if you have merit and even if you have all kinds of things, you won't be able to have whatever we have right now. In the book A Journey to the West, I remember that when Potsdam Rinpoche went to San Francisco, we were having dinner in a restaurant. While we were eating, Potsdam Rinpoche was had tears while eating, and then he said that it is really because of the unfathomable blessings of the three jewels. We foreigners coming to this completely foreign place, yet there are still people providing meals to us. After saying that, I was very touched, but I had some. I was kind of afraid that the Westerners may not think that the Buddha provided meals, rather as a monastic. If you were to go to different places, how could you receive the alms or providings without the other people offering it to you? But from a different perspective, the monastics, if it is not because of the teachings of the Buddha, how would we be able to receive the meals and all kinds of providings from the sentient beings? So maybe we're resting in hotels or having meals in restaurants. At any place receiving anything, we should harbor a sense of gratitude to anything and in any situation. Otherwise, if you were to be very arrogant and feeling that you have made great contribution to the world and sentient beings owe you to provide you this, that is really inappropriate way of thinking. Now we have such supreme a supreme human body that we are listening to Dharma teachings. On top of that, we have all kinds of favorable conditions, including the provisions, including the Dharma teachings, including the shrine hall that we have, including the lamps, the electricity, and audios and videos, and different kinds of causes and conditions coming from different aspects are now matured. And it is matured because of the sentient beings, and because it's related to sentient beings, because of the causes and conditions contributed by sentient beings. For example, when it comes to shrine hall building, if we don't have people donating or help us with financial provisions to build the shrine hall, nor have people to build it, then we won't be able to have it. On top of that, microphone, computer, and all these causes and conditions, as well as the makers for them, them. If they are not there, we won't be able to listen or receive Dharma teachings in shrine halls. So, great Terton Lerab Lingpa stated that, in fact, whatever we have, even including the opportunities of encountering the supreme Dharma teachings, is because of the sentient beings. We should have such kinds of gratitude to everyone. At the beginning, we should generate supreme bodhicitta, and then we should practice, for example, generosity, because as a Buddhist practitioner, we need to complete or accomplish the two accumulations, and all of that needs to be fulfilled by relying on the sentient beings as well, because if there are no sentient beings to liberate, then I won't be able to generate a bodhicitta. And then in the 6 paramitas, generosity and shila and patience and meditation and so on and so forth, in fact, they all need to rely on sentient beings as well, without which we won't be able to practice them. According to the Mahayana Sutra, the ornament of the Mahayana Sutra Shastra, it states that all the way from the very beginning of making the aspiration of bodhicitta through the accumulation of the two accumulations, all rely on sentient beings. In fact, in Mahayana practice, we have no enemy. The Mahayana practitioners should have no enemy, because everyone is our mothers, or had been our mothers. And all the sentient beings have bestowed great kindness to all of us. And this is not just a lip service, rather it's very wholeheartedly we should feel in such a way. For that reason, we need to want to help sentient beings, eager to benefit sentient beings. If we have this kind of mind, then you can see that this person has a little bit of bodhicitta. The other day, Khenpo, who told me that, well, not many people want to volunteer and serve the Sangha. Everyone wants to practice by themselves. What should I do? I said, well, it takes some time. But then I thought to myself that the leader really takes a very important role in terms of gearing people's mindset. For example, if a teacher or Khenpo and Khenmo, if they're very passionate, if they have the keen sense of wanting to benefit sentient beings and wanting to, for example, help sentient beings, then all the followers would also have that genuine feeling. If the teacher is really tired at all times and feeling that it is too much to help the sentient beings and it is simply very troublesome, then people would follow their mentality as well. The students are like the copies or the modes, the copies of a teacher. For example, if the teacher does not like to dress up and care about their outlook, then the students usually don't do that either. Similarly, in the monastic crowd, if you really make the aspirations and if you wholeheartedly feel that the sentient beings are truly important, without them we won't be able to practice Mahayana, then you won't turn a blind eye to them. Because if you were to turn a blind eye to them and just close yourself at home, that is not going to be very helpful to all sentient beings at all. You won't even have an opportunity to benefit the sentient beings. You need to have perseverance, you need to have the mindset to benefit the sentient beings, because they're just like our mothers. This is really important. When we studied the way of the Bodhisattvas, where it says that if we do not rely on the kindness of the sentient beings, we would not be able to gain any of the qualities and the merits to attain the path and bhumis of
of Mahayana. And if we can attain that, how could we even attain Buddhahood? If you don't even want to look at sentient beings, if you close your eyes to sentient beings, how could you help sentient beings at all? So you need to understand that the worldly beings are really important to us. There's, in a worldly sense, there are researches where it says that if one were to have gratitude, then they are more likely to enjoy health, longevity, happiness, and the way they perceive the world is really beautiful. People with a sense of gratitude tend to have a beautiful world and pleasant world. But if you were to have lots of complaints about the world, if you look at the world in the way that it is very ugly, then you won't be happy, which in result could lead to illness and short lifespan. Also, the world would, in return, give you the kinds of coarse feedback. I really hope that you can contemplate up on these teachings. Maybe you understand it now, but I really hope that you can think about it again and again. I don't want you to throw away this text and never to look at it again and saying goodbye, Lerab Lingpa. In such a way, it's not going to help you in your mind stream. There are different people in the world. There are people who can accept the teaching and practice the teaching right away. And those are the ones with sharp capacity. And then for people with medium capacity, they would read it again and again, and then it works. But for the ones without any understanding, they won't be able to practice it.
在这个时候呢，到了这里呢，有些人提出这样的一个疑问，这个疑问还是很好的。我以前都是在其他学校里面也遇到过这个。假设说有人想
The other day, we had some sound issue, and the staff member over here, who's in charge of it, kept on smiling. And I asked him, well, there's a sound issue. What are you smiling about? And he said, oh, well, it is to alleviate stress. Yesterday, I couldn't even hear much about your chanting, but today it's a little bit better. The internet works a bit better. But the sound today, streaming from your end, sounds like the records from the 90s. But whatever it may be, I'll transform it onto the path of enlightenment. Till here, there are people who then pose a question to Lerab Lingpa saying that if all the sentient beings had been my mothers and had bestowed great kindness to me before, well, if someone do agree that there are sentient beings who the sentient beings had been my mothers and parents and had bestowed me great kindness, I agree with that. But in the same logic, they must had already been my enemies and foes and who harmed me. Not only they had been my mothers, they must have been my enemies as well and had harmed me, even killed me before. Then what should I do? This is the question. The author explains it really well. What's wrong with you? Is it better?
就刚才这个疑问呢，很好的，一切众生呢，当过这个父母，那一切众生也是当过原体，我们为什么
The anesthesia is still working right now. The Tibetan medicine is
造成这样的这个灾难和损害的原因。
We're currently making some Tibetan medicine. Not sure if it's ready. Not sure if it's already produced, because the Tibetan medicine is made in accordance with a prescription given by a Terton or discovered by a Terton. There are different types of medications. I took some and then
反过来把自己的这个业力呢，现前的。所以这些众生呢，
Apparently, according to some of the prescriptions, the medications can be made and there are some can't. The one that I took has some anesthesia, and today during my class I feel a bit drowsy rather. I feel like I'm having car sick. Anyhow, let's come back to the question. The question is that since all sentient beings had been my parents as well, then they must also had been my enemies. Then why should I repay their kindness but not take revenge on them? This is the question. And Lerab Lingpa said that it is really because you had already created the causes of harming the other beings, and because of your karma and the fruition of your karma, you are suffering from, or you have suffered from those kinds of consequences. Since the sentient beings are all under the control of karma and afflictions, on one hand, we have harmed others, and similarly, they would harm us back because of karma, the karma and afflictions. For that reason, we are really the doers of our own harm, and that is why we should not blame them. From the Dharmic point of view, not only we should not blame them when they're harming us, they become the favorable conditions for us to practice patience, which is an important component for us to practice on the path of bodhi. For that reason, even if they had created harm, they were our good companions who helped us to alleviate, to purify our negative deeds. They work as a broom to sweep away our negative deeds and karma. In some ways, we can say that they're encouraging us and help us to practice virtue. Maybe their actions may seem to be the harmful deeds. However, indeed, they are beneficial to you in the long run. That is why once you recognize it, you need to contemplate upon the ones who does harm to you and started viewing the beneficial aspects of them and view them as some companions that is really necessary on the path of enlightenment. According to the treasury of pith instructions as well as the way of bodhisattvas, it states that one should really like one's own enemies, because if you like your enemies, then all of the and then if you really know how to practice with it, then all of the adversities could be transformed onto the path of enlightenment. Now, in the 100 verses of wisdom, where it says that even if you were to encounter an enemy who's really harmful to you, you should protect them with compassion, because they would only be of benefit to you. They would not harm you at all. But worldly beings would say that, oh no, if I were to do that, people would take me as someone who's completely weak, and then they would take advantage of me. But that is really just a worldly way of seeing it. We really need these kinds of people for us to practice on the path, and this is the method of practice. If you can transform such conditions, then it would be very good for you. It would be very beneficial. On one hand, it is not only that you will be able to avoid of harming the sentient beings, you can also succeed in your own practice. That is why this path is a very interesting path. I'm not sure if you noticed this news that I read recently. The ex-president of United United States, President Trump, he was indicted and then he was in the prison for a very short period of time and took a mugshot. Because he wanted to run for the 2024 presidential race, and he made the announcement that I will run for the president. And then maybe because others are creating different kinds of obstacles to him, so he was indicted and then he had to be taken into prison and took a mugshot. He went into the mugshot for 20 minutes and the mugshot just went viral, being the first president ever in the United States history who took a mugshot. He got quite renowned for it, and then he took this as an opportunity and made it into a campaign picture. I think in some ways the practitioners such as us, we need to learn that kind of attitude. Although sometimes we may feel that this is probably the worst thing that ever happened to me, but maybe we can transform it, and then maybe that thing could become a favorable condition for us and become meaningful and become valuable instead of being harmful to you. Many people may feel that, well, how could you say that we need our enemies? How could we see them as our benefactors? I don't think so. But as a Mahayana practitioner, we can train to practice on the path, train to practice to transform all kinds of causes, all kinds of conditions. Now, it says that not only we have not repaid kindness to all of the sentient beings who had bestowed great kindness to me, I had harmed them in various ways. And now we understand these teachings, we should really regret and start to correct our behaviors. Now, in the worldly sense, taking revenge is considered as courageous. But from Mahayana point of view, each and every sentient being had bestowed us great kindness, and we have the opportunity, we have the responsibility to benefit them. According to the ornament of the Mahayana Sutra Shastra, it says that the bodhisattvas who shoulder the responsibilities to benefit sentient beings, if you were to practice slowly and postpone the practice of benefiting sentient beings without caring for the sentient beings, this is considered as an embarrassment. You have made the aspiration of bodhicitta. You need to be courageous enough to accept your responsibility. So here it says that from now on, I will pay attention and care for all the sentient beings' suffering and happiness as they had been my mothers. So now each one of you should have that kind of mindset that I am going to shoulder the responsibility to benefit sentient beings. I am going to make the aspiration of bodhicitta to liberate all sentient beings. I am going to benefit sentient beings by propagating Dharma. We need to have these kinds of courage. We need to have the kinds of responsibility and braveness to benefit sentient beings and help them to successfully attain happiness and alleviate their suffering. So we need to repeatedly train ourselves in this practice. So whenever we practice bodhicitta, we need to have such kind of activeness. We need to do it from our heart. If you were to do it rather quite passive-aggressively and doing it with a sense of suffering and reluctantly, then as a Buddhist practitioner, especially a Mahayana practitioner, is rather considered to be as really selfish. And then in that way, our mind of benefiting others will be quite weak. Maybe because our karma is rather quite, we have quite heavy burdens of karma, and maybe you haven't really developed a sense or an experience of bodhicitta. In that case, you should really practice supplication to the three jewels, practice confession. It is because of your negative karma that you cannot make progress on the path of practice. So you need to practice all of those above as well as accumulate merit. Sometimes when we don't have a good mood, sometimes because our health is declining, so on and so forth, our mind may change and our mood may change. Lots of great masters of the past, for example, whenever everything is going well, they would practice. And sometimes when their health is not good and their mood is not good, they would try to practice on the confession and supplication. And then when the mood transforms or changes to be a little bit better, they would then change back to the practice of bodhicitta again. So you can alternate between the two methods. Now, whenever you are practicing on bodhicitta, you need to shoulder the responsibility of benefiting others. You need to look at the sentient being's happiness and suffering in such a way. You need to think that you are going to benefit sentient beings, to liberate sentient beings, and care about sentient beings. When you generate such kind of a mind and attitude, and then the way you look at a sentient being is completely different. You will notice that the sentient beings are completely being turned by the karma and their afflictions, though that they seek for happiness. But because they are foolish and they cannot practice the causes to attain the fruition of happiness, they are not able to be happy eventually. That is why we need to practice and we need to help the sentient beings to seek the right path. In large cities, I think sentient beings really need spiritual teachers and companions to practice on the right path. In the large urban cities, for example, we notice that the people get so busy every day seeking for happiness, but they can barely get them. Majority of them spend their days and nights in suffering. If there could be spiritual teachers and spiritual companions in large cities, then I think that would be very auspicious and it would create auspicious connections for people to tread onto the right path. There are great masters and some really wonderful teachers in prestigious universities, Harvard, Oxford, and Cambridge, Tsinghua University, Beijing University, Fudan University. Lots of great teachers are there to help the students. However, majority of them only speak of the knowledge that is to help the students in this life. They don't really speak of how to practice on the causes to accumulate happiness and to alleviate from suffering, because majority of schools do not allow to give teachings on that. Even in Western countries, to propagate religion is not allowed in schools. And then let's look at in big cities. In large cities, we can barely encounter any spiritual teachers or good spiritual teachers. Even if you were to encounter them, it is very difficult for sentient beings to only view the virtuous qualities of the spiritual teachers. And the young people nowadays have all kinds of afflictions, such as aggression, such as desire and jealousy and arrogance and so on. Even if they were to encounter a really wonderful spiritual teacher that is just like a Buddha, like a bodhisattva, however, majority of people are under the control of Maras, and they would treat the teachers as they are the same as the mundane beings. Just as in Lhasa, people would treat the jewel statue as a norm. And some of the spiritual teachers are viewed as a relative, a friend, a brother, or a Dharma friend by mundane beings. Also, in front of spiritual teachers, not many would seek for teachings from them. So firstly, it's very rare to be able to encounter the qualified spiritual teachers, and even if you were to encounter them, it is not easy to see them with a sacred outlook. And thirdly, after you relied on such a teacher, it is difficult to receive the teachings that would be beneficial to you. And even if you receive the Dharma teachings, it is difficult for people to truly put those teachings into practice. And even if one were to practice a little bit, but the power and the kinds of perseverance of engaging in practice is rather very weak, because sentient beings have a very weak habitual tendency to practice virtue, and they don't really have that wonderful connections. I'm not sure what Lerab Lingpa got to those kinds of impressions, maybe people around that time. Anyhow, he very vividly describes the situation that we have now, we encounter now. Sometimes it's very difficult for us to receive teachings, and then even if we were to receive the teachings, we won't put it into practice. And even if you were to practice upon it, and it is such kind of practice is rather very superficial. Even if you were to practice with diligence and perseverance, because lacking the habitual patterns, habitual tendencies of practicing virtue, and do not have virtuous connections, after even one short session, it feels like it takes forever. When there are people who listen for one class, they would feel that, oh, it took me 2 hours, I'm too tired, and my eyes are now can't see clearly, my ears can't hear properly, and my mind has already declined, and I can't even walk properly. So they would complain about all kinds of things. But when it comes to looking or watching TV series or doing worldly Dharma, practicing worldly Dharma, it seems that they're quite energetic and proficient. Lerab Lingpa lived about 100 years ago, 1926. He had passed away for over about 100 years. Maybe back then, people were not that bad in Tibet, but we can see that nowadays, people are exactly like how he described. For example, there are the ones who even engage in virtuous deeds, such as making offering of one glass of water or even one handful of soil. They would take it as something that is an extravagant good deed, and they would boast about themselves because of it. And then they would boast about any little bit of good deeds that they did, releasing life or attending fundraising or having good connections with certain lamas, and started to show off about their little bit of a virtue. And in the degenerated age that is now, the sentient beings are so stubborn, it is very difficult to tame them. They have lots of aggression. Even at times of practicing virtue, right away they would have anger, and the anger would burn off all of their virtuous deeds. Especially young people, I think, out of nothing, they would get really angry. Sometimes I would say that, could you show me some information about this and that? They would say that no, and they would get really impatient and they would walk out. They would say that I quit. People seems to be lacking patience nowadays, and they have lots of aggression. And there are people who may seem to be like a practitioner, but inwardly it is very difficult for them to practice virtue all the way from beginning to the end. Young people tend to have more desire, and the seniors may have more aggression, and because of that, their virtuous deeds cannot be thoroughly practiced. And because their virtuous deeds are so little and so weak, it is quite rare for them to receive the fruition of happiness. Just as if we were to plant a little bit of seed, we won't be able to have lots of crops. Similarly, it is difficult for sentient beings to have the happiness of taking rebirth in higher realms, especially when we look at the beings staying in large cities. The things that they eat, drink, and things they do are full of vice. And for those kinds of beings, not speaking of liberation, it is hard for them to be reborn in higher realms. It is hard for them to attain any little bit of happiness later. When we make such observation, we would be able to see that since people practice lots of non-virtue, it is difficult for them to attain happiness. And even sometimes it may appear to be a little bit of happiness, but such happiness would right away vanish, just like the bird standing on the tip of a branch would fly away, or the morning dew would evaporate from the blade of grass very quickly. People would probably say that, well, Buddhism is so pessimistic, but we should understand that it is not that Buddhism is pessimistic, rather we know the nature of things, because it is the nature of change. Even the happiness that we have nowadays, they uphold the nature of change. It is the truth. It is not that we are speaking lies to you, it is rather we are speaking truth to you. If we were to speak of suffering and sugarcoat it as happiness and perfection and so on and so forth, it is simply not true, because even through movies you can see there are people who said that, oh, we'll get married and then live happily after. But through movies and TVs we also see that people who have those kinds of experience of marriage, how many of them are truly happy all the way through? In the teachings it says that even a little bit of so-called happiness does not have the nature of true happiness. I am not trying to be a killjoy here, but when we look at the nature of the little bit of happiness that we have, they're simply just like a little dew on a blade of grass that would evaporate really quickly. The dew may appear to be really beautiful, but very quickly it will evaporate, and just like the happiness that we have will vanish very quickly, even if you were to find it. Even if you were to find happiness, you should also understand that suffering in this world would come next. That is why we often say that samsara is suffering. And we don't speak of suffering as being happy, full of happiness. Now, when it comes to the practice of it, which is practice of compassion aspect, you can practice with the combination of compassion while making observation, while alternating with observation and abiding. In terms of compassion, we talk about how sentient beings, though do not wish to suffer from any little bit of the fruition of pain or suffering, but they accumulate the causes of suffering without paying attention, there are lots of powers in terms of the way they created negative deeds, such as the negative deeds, that is the inherent negative deeds, as well as the wrong deeds stipulated by the Buddha. Though we do not wish to suffer, we create all kinds of causes that would lead to suffering. For example, especially nowadays, there are people who get very proficient at making negative deeds. For example, in terms of fishing, in the past we just fish a little bit. We have very limited ways in fishing. But nowadays, people are able to get so much fish out of lakes or oceans. That really shows the capacity of people's power in creating negative deeds. On top of that, there are people who have all kinds of friends, bad companies, who wholeheartedly like to create negative deeds. They're distracted, they're lazy, and they create all kinds of illicit activities. And whenever they practice those kinds of negative deeds, they are very energetic. They're very good at it. Not sure if in Tibet it was as bad as it is now. However, it seems that people nowadays, they have lots of wisdom, power, and capacity in terms of creating negative deeds. And in this dark age, not only they're more capable, there are more favorable conditions to help them to create those negative deeds. They're very fortunate while creating those negative deeds. However, when we look at ourselves, when we practice beneficial activities to ourselves as well as others, or practice emptiness, and whenever we practice any kinds of virtuous deeds, it seems that we have all kinds of obstacles popping up. But when people are killing the animals, chicken, pigs, cows, or having military bases, or having sexual misconducts, and lying, smoking, drinking, intoxication, things like that, it's very easy for them to do all of those. And there are lots of favorable conditions for them to do that. In contrary, if we were to build a monastery, a practice center, it is very difficult to get permits for it. But when it comes to building military bases, it's very easy for them to do that. And for example, in Tibet, nowadays it is nearly impossible to build any monasteries in Tibet. Some of the monastics, we have less and less monastics as well. But if people want to build a place to butcher animals, to have military bases such as in Ukraine and in Russia, and if they want to produce all kinds of weapons, if they want to have young people to sign up to join the military, it is very easy. And lots of young people are willing to sign up and to go to the battlefield and sacrifice their lives for such aggression. This is the fact of degenerated age. More favorable conditions for people to practice the vice, and very difficult for the ones who want to practice the virtue. Ever since the beginningless time, people had accumulated the inherent negative deeds as well as the negative deeds that's stipulated by the Buddha. So we have lots of those seeds. And if we have those seeds ready and stocked up in our mind stream, just as how crops would grow from seeds, they would eventually mature. That is why it says that even if you don't wish for those kinds of causes to mature, but because the negative deeds would come to maturation without your following your wishes, and you will eventually taste the bitter fruit that is planted by yourself. And the suffering would be very difficult to bear, just as pouring rain or ghastly wind. Nobody would be able to run away from it. Everyone may feel that they're very good at working, or they have lots of energy, and they have lots of vitality. But while trying their best to run away from the fruition of suffering, they kept on creating more seeds of suffering, just as a madman. It is said that even the most excellent teacher would not be able to liberate the kind of people who are of the most vice. According to the Chinese tradition, you often would speak of how the Buddha would not be able to liberate those people who have not created connections, right? So there is really nothing we can do about people's karma. Even the great Buddha would not be able to stop the fruition of suffering of sentient beings, and they would have to go through or have their bitter fruit, just as a blind man without any help, being abandoned in wilderness. That is truly pitiful. That is really heart-aching. But all kinds of situations that's happening in the world are exactly like that. But those beings cannot be helped or liberated by great teachers, nor even the Buddha himself. But even so, we still need to make the aspiration to benefit and liberate these sentient beings. We have now obtained the treasure that is this precious human body that is endowed with all the favorable conditions and freedoms. On top of that, we have encountered our great masters, and now we have the opportunity to listen to the precious Dharma teaching given by our teachers, so we can practice accordingly. While we're so free, the only way to return the kindness of all sentient beings who are just like our old mothers, we need to help them to swiftly get out of the causes of all sufferings that would lead them to be trapped in the cyclic existence that is samsara. We need to make such aspiration. Those sentient beings are so difficult to liberate. Those sentient beings are so stubborn. But now I have such a wonderful opportunity. I have to try my very best to benefit these sentient beings. I would try my very best, even if that means I have to go to Africa, even if that means I have to go to large chaotic cities, I would still do that. For people who have courage to benefit sentient beings, sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean that this person has to have the wisdom and knowledge to teach the sentient beings the five treatises. Rather, sometimes in different places, they need the presence of a Dharma teacher. And a Dharma teacher being at different places is really important. They will be like lamps lighting up the darkness of different areas. They would benefit sentient beings like such. They would contribute greatly in such a way. But of course, they should not be selfish and make all the lay practitioners slander the Dharma or the monastics. Rather, it is the best for the monastics to go to different places to benefit sentient beings as much as possible, because these beings would not be able to encounter the genuine Dharma if they do not encounter any people, any monastics there. Sometimes I think to myself, life is really short. If human life could extend for another 20 or 30 years, if my health would be a little bit better, I really wish to make more connections with people who, with more sentient beings. Unlike the Western countries in China mainland, unlike in China mainland, the Western countries, since they already had the foundation of certain traditions of religions, it is very difficult for them to adopt a new religion. But China mainland is different because people had not received much of the spiritual education yet. It is easy for them to accept spiritual education, and then they're willing to accept those new ideas. Once they start to accept them wholeheartedly, accept those teachings wholeheartedly, the teachings will definitely make a change in their life. It will definitely create a difference. And in the past, it had done so. This is really important. Or here says that not only that we should practice bodhicitta, we need to also learn from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 3 times to accumulate the 2 merits or 2 provisions. I will wholeheartedly and sincerely practice without any interruption until I attain the fruition of bodhicitta. We need to make such aspiration. This is the first aspect, which is the practice that is taken the sentient beings as the object. The next part is taken the fruition of Buddhahood as the object in our meditation practice. On top of that, we need to make the aspiration wholeheartedly that may I swiftly alleviate all kinds of causes of suffering and the fruition of suffering of the sentient beings that is just like our old mothers. We need to make such aspiration first, and then we need to combine it with our intention, which is to say that right now, at this moment, if I were to be able to alleviate the suffering of all sentient beings, wouldn't that be wonderful? This is the eagerness, the intention aspect of the practice. The first one is making aspiration. I wish to do so and so. And then the second part is to have such eagerness to accomplish it. This is the second aspect. And the third one is wholeheartedly and genuinely, firmly, devoutly to make the aspiration that all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that pervades the whole space, as well as the root teacher, that is like the wish-fulfilling jewel, who is the embodiment of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Could you please now, at this very moment, right away, bless me, grant me blessings right away to alleviate the causes and fruition of suffering of all sentient beings. This is really important. So the first part of the practice is to make aspiration and then generate intense eagerness, and then to wholeheartedly and genuinely supplicate to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the root teacher, ask them to grant blessings to you so that you can liberate sentient beings, so you can think about about it at all times. If you can make such aspiration, the power is inconceivable, especially if you were to be a mundane person. At the time that you generated such genuine bodhicitta, then you don't necessarily have to think about it at all times every day. There are people who feel that, oh, I didn't practice generation of bodhicitta today, and maybe I should retake the vow and so on. But that's not necessarily. Once you took a bodhisattva vow, and then as long as you do not abandon it or do not violate it, you still have that vow. Especially if you do not make the vow that I would never liberate or help sentient beings. As long as you do not think such kind of a vicious vow, then you would still keep the bodhicitta and the bodhisattva vow, rather. There was a story that a young monk who's traveling with his master, who's an arhat. On the way, when the young monk was carrying all the luggages, he secretly made an aspiration, and he generated bodhicitta. He thinks that, oh, I am generating bodhicitta, I'm going to liberate all sentient beings. The teacher, arhat, since he is clairvoyant, he then right away knew it, and then he took all the luggage, saying that, oh, you're a great bodhisattva, I will carry the luggage, you don't have to carry it. And then halfway through, the young monk made a rather wise or wrong dualistic thought, thinking it is very difficult to liberate sentient beings, though. And right at that moment, the arhat said that, oh, since you don't have bodhicitta anymore, you continue to carry our luggage. It is said in such a way. In the sutras, it says that if we were to supplicate wholeheartedly and sincerely, we would be able to practice at any time. We need to supplicate in such a way that in order to alleviate the suffering of all sentient beings, that's like our mothers, we should not aim for the happiness of celestial beings and human beings, rather, nor the kinds of peace and nor the kinds of peace of Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, and Arhats. Rather, I should wish for them to attain the perfect fruition of Buddhahood that is not abiding on the two extremes, that is endowed with the four kayas and five wisdoms, that is perfectly endowed with the two benefits. We need to contemplate in such a way. And then we need to practice genuine virtuous deeds while sincerely make such aspiration. This is the second aspect of bodhicitta. This is really important. All of these things that's stated above can be found in the content over here. 就是昨天我们讲的也很清楚，就是所以我们所作所为的是一定要有一个菩提心来这个摄持。如果菩提心来摄持的话，就是那就好办了，这个善根就非常大了。由此呢，就是可以无期获得。Can become the causes of attaining omniscience. 大大小小的善根啊，都必须要。 It is not a direct cause, rather it is like the plowing aspect of planting plants or harvesting crops. It is not the direct cause, but it is definitely a very important condition. But the precious bodhicitta is like seed. That is really important. This is really the root and life of the two paths that is the Mahayana, the Mahayana's path of Sutrayana and Vajrayana teachings. So we need to repeatedly to practice on bodhicitta. If we can practice in such a way on our mind, we will be able to purify all kinds of negative deeds and to alleviate, to pacify all kinds of obstacles, to have our wishes to come true and increase the kinds of virtuous provisions. Now, how to practice it, you may ask. For example, if you were to circumambulate a stupa today, then you first of all need to generate bodhicitta. This is the preliminary. And then you can practice circumambulation. This is the beginning of the aspiration. Whatever kinds of virtuous deeds, at the very beginning of practicing or carry out that virtuous deeds, you need to have that beginning generation of bodhicitta. I'm going to attend a class, a Dharma class. I'm going to translate a book. I'm going to serve the Sangha. I'm going to practice a little bit. Before you practice any of those virtues, you need to make aspiration that I am going to benefit sentient beings. This is the beginning aspiration. When you meet the requirement, then the aspiration is the continuous aspiration. So when you are working, when you are carrying out the activity, for example, at the time of building a washroom, then if you were to think that at the beginning of the building of the washroom, I'm building this for all sentient beings. And then while you're building it all the way through, you should contemplate and maintain the aspiration that you're building this for the sentient beings. You're building this for the benefit of them. Then this is called the continuous of aspiration. It is constantly ongoing with your actual activity. So this is really important. I believe it is stated in a Shastra where it says that the ones who generate bodhicitta, they may appear to be benefiting themselves, but they're really benefiting themselves. It may appear to be that they're benefiting others, but it really is benefiting themselves. So whatever we're doing, we need to do it with bodhicitta.